personally do not believe that Darwinian evolution actually explains the organized complexity of the living world. But we're going to concede it. So the question is, you might think that, well, if I've conceded already evolution, then that's the end of the game. The fact is that what I'm going to try to show you, this is maybe one of the most important points, maybe the central point that's going to come out tonight. And that is that, contrary to popular belief, I'm going to demonstrate to you Darwinian evolution is completely irrelevant to the whole question of the existence of a creator. That is not what the public's perception is. The public's perception is, and in the world of the academic, the perception is that, oh, Darwinian evolution, of course, you don't need God anymore. We've explained it naturally. It is absolutely, completely irrelevant to the question. Okay? How can I say that? Okay, let me explain how I can say that. Well, what does it mean when we say we have accepted Darwinian evolution as a theory? It means the following. Darwinian evolution is based on random mutations in the DNA of a living organism. That when it reproduces, when it self-replicates, there are little copying mistakes in the genetic material. When you make a mistake in the genetic material, which is kind of like the computer program that directs the assembly of the particular organism, there's a little mistake. So the organism comes out a little different because the instructions are slightly different, okay? Sometimes, by pure chance, these little copying mistakes give the particular organism a survival advantage, which makes it more likely that it will survive, or makes it more likely that this change will be passed on to its offspring. And over millions and millions of years, all the little changes add up, and from the simplest bacteria, here we are. Okay? That's the theory. So now, Darwinian evolution, listen very carefully, explains how you get from a living organism that has a DNA-based living organism, how it changes over millions of years. That's what it purports to do. However, what Darwinian evolution does not do, and does not even pretend to address, is how that first living organism got there in the first place. It works, again, this is the claim, it works once you have this thing in place. How did it get there? Darwinian evolution does not even talk about it. The discipline of Darwinian evolution is the field of biology. Biology, the study of living things. How did it get there? That's called origin of life research. It is a completely, totally different area of science. The essential discipline of origin of life is not biology. It is organic chemistry and maybe microbiology or biochemistry. Because what origin of life has to explain, if you're coming from the viewpoint of an atheist, is how do you get from inorganic chemicals to a living organism? Somehow that has to make that transition. That's not biology. Biology is only once it's alive. How do you get from non-life to life? That is the question. Now, if you think that's a simple question, it is not a simple question at all. The simplest living organism that anyone has, there's any evidence that ever existed, and before which there is no evidence that there was anything before that, is a form of bacterium. Okay? Now, a bacterium is a living organism. It's maybe measured in millionths of meters, a millionth of a meter, the smallest bacterium. And it self-replicates with because it has a fully formed DNA system that that divides itself. Let me explain to you what is going on when you're in the simplest way. I'm not talking about from a very complex scientific way. The simplest scientific viewpoint, what's going on. And I'm going to quote not from a creationist or not from a believing Christian scientist. We're going to quote from one of the leading atheists in the world today, Richard Dawkins. Okay, who wrote a book called The God Delusion. It's a bestseller. It sold millions. It's been translated, I think, into 30 languages. He is the high priest of atheism today, Richard Dawkins. This is what he writes about the DNA, the genetic material. After Watson and Crick, who were the people who discovered DNA, we know that genes themselves are living strings, listen carefully, of pure digital information. What is more, they are truly digital in the full and strong sense of computers and compact disks. The machine code of the genes is uncannily computer-like. Apart from differences in jargon, the pages of a molecular biology journal might be interchanged with those of a computer engineering journal. Our genetic system, which is the universal system for all life on the planet, is digital to the core. DNA characters are copied with an accuracy that rivals anything modern engineers can do. DNA messages are pure digital code. I'm going to quote Dr. Paul Davies, who is an atheist, a physicist, an expert in origin of life. He says almost the same thing. In a living organism, we see the power of software. Listen to the terms they're using. Or information processing refined to an incredible degree. The problem of the origin of life reduces to one of understanding how encoded software emerged spontaneously from hardware. How did it happen? How did nature go digital? And finally, Bill Gates, from his book, The Road Ahead. DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software we've ever created. In other words, for though I don't know if the people who are involved in computers, in the DNA, which by the way, there's no such thing as primitive DNA. The DNA of the simplest bacterium works on this exact same code as our DNA. Obviously, it's a different code, and because our DNA produces us, and their DNA produces a bacterium. But the coding is exactly the same. It's just like, it doesn't matter which Windows program you're using, the operating program is all the same. So that's what he means when it says it's a universal digital code. Now I want you to keep something in mind. We didn't even know what digital code was until a few decades ago. Somebody knew about it 3.5 billion years ago, okay, when the first bacterium emerged. We're going to go on that assumption that we're going to deal with the standard scientific model that life emerged about 3.5 billion years ago on the Earth, okay? And the simplest, like I said, the simplest life forms that they've ever found are these bacteria, cyanobacteria. So that's number one. But what about the cell itself? That's the genetic code in the cell. What about the actual cell itself? Okay? I'm going to read to you also I'm going to bear with me as I read. I want you to understand what we're talking about when we're talking about trying to figure out how do you go from inorganic chemicals to living organisms. This is again Dr. Paul Davies and Dr. Michael Denton. These are not creationists. These are not people who advocate intelligent design theory. And I just want anyone to know, I don't quote anyone in my book, any scientist in the book, who is a proponent of those theories. Only people who are either atheists, agnostics, against intelligent design theory, those are the people that I use. I don't need to have people agree with me. I'm going to show you the people who disagree with me what they say.